Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be giving my thoughts on Agony Unrated, which is coming out October 31st. If you've been following the game before its initial release, you would probably know that the game did horrible when it first came out. No need to sugarcoat anything. The game was universally panned by players and critics alike. And to top it all off, it only got one article by some whiny video game journalist complaining about the amount of tits in the game. How bad of a game do you have to do when even the edginess does not ire the video game journalists? No, instead people complained about the censorship, they complained about the lighting, they complained about the glitches, and they complained about the lackluster to downright broken and infuriating gameplay mechanics. And they were all right to do so. The game was not very well pieced together, to say the least. And the devs are, I guess, trying again with this Agony Unrated. I don't know why they are allowed to now legally add in all of the uncensored stuff into the game. On Steam, the game is released under one of the developers' names rather than the studio. But evidently, they are trying again. The game will be about $15, but if you bought the game the first time, it'll be 90% off on Steam, and if you donated to their Kickstarter, it's free. Maybe that'll entice you to buy it. Maybe you wouldn't want to risk the money on such a gamble that we've already seen has not done well the first time. It's completely up to you. I'm not going to tell you what and what not to do, but I do want to give my thoughts on it. So you can watch the trailer on their YouTube page, and I have an article by Rely on Horror open that gives some bullet point list of some of the changes between the first version and Agony Unrated. And I figure I might as well give my pointless points of view since I did cover the game a bit when it was coming out, and I think the video I did on the demons in the game is still my most watched video somehow. And so one of the changes they've made is they've improved the quality of the character models and textures, which is one of the things that it was criticized for and was linked to the whole censorship issue. And in fact, in the trailer, when they were pointing this out, all the clips were of female NPC models, because that's one of the things that really stuck out. The woman in the game did not look good, and not for the reasons you would expect from a hell hide-and-seek horror simulator. That's fine. They have new environmental hazards like these traps in the game, and I do think that's a nifty idea. I question how well they can be implemented, considering that the movement in the game is not very good, and even in the new trailer it doesn't look like that was particularly improved. It's still gonna be the general janky movement from what I've seen. So that, combined with environmental hazards to avoid, might not be a very good mix, but maybe they've really tested this out and made sure that it's not frustrating to put up with, but is an actual challenge. They have new types of static opponents, which is kind of interesting. I think the only static opponent in the initial version was these onoskeletons trapped in rock and ice that you use to kill whatever demon you're currently possessing, so you can sort of free your soul and possess a human without interference from the demon you previously possessed. And they have a new, more extensive and useful character development system. In the first game, you were able to upgrade 3 things. You could upgrade how long you hold your breath. You can upgrade how silent you are when moving around. And I think you can upgrade how many hits you could take. And how long you can hold your breath was also tied to how long you can run. And I think a lot of people found that was a better thing to upgrade, since it's just a lot more convenient to run away from your opponents and play the hide and sneak game. Now, not knowing what they mean by this, I can't say I have many further thoughts, but I do hope that, like, as long as we're talking about the character and how he plays, I do hope they found some way to make the whole thing less redundant. And by that I mean the fact that in order to sneak by an enemy, you not only need to crouch and walk really slowly, but you also need to press a second button in order to hold your breath. And if your character stops holding his breath or doesn't hold his breath at all, he gets spotted and killed. You can see why that would be a bit redundant. You're already moving slowly and trying to make as little noise as possible, but you also have to do this additional step to not make noise. They have volumetric lighting. The lighting was something criticized in the first game. It was especially bad in areas like the maze. They have normal mode and hard mode with more opponents and puzzles. I think that's something they added along the way in the first game. And I think in the first game I know in the first game there's a lot of different settings you can change to make it easier or harder as you please. I assume that would be brought over. This one's kind of odd. They claim there's a completely new type of environment, the forest, added to the procedurally... Oh, no, wait. Alright, my mistake. I thought the forest was a new environment to the main game, but it's to Agony mode. And Agony mode also includes traps and boss fights. I never really played Agony mode. I just never really took an interest in it when I heard about it. But if that's something that seems interesting to you, have fun. There's 8 different endings in the story mode. I think in the first game there's like 6 or 7, so they have one additional ending maybe. Unless I'm mistaken, then there were 8 in the original version. There's possibility to follow the story mode as a succubus, and in the next point they say that succubus mode and agony mode are unlocked from the start of the game, rather than something you have to unlock by beating the game. And I'm not sure if the possibility to follow the story mode as a succubus is like just succubus mode and worded strangely, or if you can possess a succubus and play around like that. Although I don't really see how you can really do that when there's a pretty steep time limit on how long you can stay possessed as a demon. But I do like the fact that succubus mode is going to be unlocked from the start of the game, because that's actually the mode that reviewers have said is a lot more fun than the base gameplay mode. And a part of that might just be because you can fight back, rather than, somehow being the greatest hunter in history and yet you're unable to fight a single demon to save your life. So that might be good. At least give some choice in it. If you don't like the main game, you might like the succubus mode, or you might like agony mode. And there's, of course, many new uncensored scenes. That's no doubt the biggest controversy surrounding the game, and it's justified. There was a promise made that was broken by the developers due to the choices they've made along the way, specifically who they've signed up with publishing deals with. But I do hope that when they were making this Agony Unrated, they were aware that uncensored or the censorship stuff was not the only problem, and maybe not even necessarily the biggest. Because no matter how many tits and dicks and blood and baby gore you can add in, that wouldn't necessarily make the gameplay mechanics more fun, or the level design better, or the puzzles more enticing, or anything like that. Something to be aware of. They have a black and red image filter that was inspired by the trailers. Like, if you've seen the trailers or even the new one for the unrated version, you'll know they absolutely adore their black and white filter. I don't have an opinion one way or another, but I think a few people have suggested that to them. Here's an interesting one. They have a world map and a mini map in the game, which how to explain this? The game Agony was originally just a series of concept animations by the lead developer, and in those concept animations the main character picks up a map, and I think in one of the corners of the screen he's able to see where he is in the area because he has that knowledge now. But that was removed from the game itself. There's no maps in the standard version of Agony. And while it isn't, the most sprawling game of all time, it still does have its nooks and crannies, and a map might be useful, especially in the rather hard to navigate areas like the Fractal Forest, which was honestly just a complete cluster. So that could be a good addition. And here's something that actually did really pique my interest when I saw it. The possibility of setting up a fire and killing some opponents as a martyr. Now, Agony is supposed to be a hide-and-seek horror game. You're running around completely defenseless, and everything you come across will pretty much kill you. Like in Alien Isolation, like in Amnesia, like in Outlast. It's one of those games. I've never really been a fan of hide-and-seek horror. I think that it's almost a cheap way to handle things where you don't really have to implement any fighting mechanics or worry that much about balancing your own power against the enemy's power. You just need to have an exit for the character to run to and make sure the enemies don't spot you too quickly. Now, Agony is a game that has a bunch of side content. It has a bunch of notes, a bunch of statues, paintings to find, and all of that. And I find that the hide-and-seek horror element of the game sort of betrays that, since you'll be more invested in making it to the next checkpoint than you would be in exploring around. So if you're able to sort of clear the area of enemies, and I don't know how this is going to be implemented, it could be implemented very poorly and so limited you really won't know when you're able to do this, or it could be implemented very well and there's some actual challenge but good balance where you're able to overcome the monsters that dwell and make room for yourself to walk around in. But I do really hope this is one of the things that's implemented the best in this new update, because I think that would substantially improve the game. Just having that edge against the demons. Or you can just play succubus mode where you do also have the edge against demons. They have sacrificial altars. I have no idea what that's supposed to do. They have new and modified paths for the player. I think that's supposed to be the light stuff the player shoots out his hands that shows you where to go. And there's numerous technical improvements to the basic version of the game and much more, which, doesn't have much to say there, but it is a promising thing. Now, I'm a generally cynical guy, and I'm not gonna be here saying you should totally buy this new version and it'll change everything and make the game good. I mean, I follow the game pretty closely, can practically say I shilled for it, and yet when the difference between when the game was about to come out and when it did come out is day and night. When it was about to come out, I was saying, oh yeah, sure, I'll play it. Then when it did come out, I played it, I just didn't record it like people expected me to. The only video I had of the actual release game was about a minute-long clip showcasing a particularly stupid glitch. So I'm not gonna make any promises. I'm gonna record myself playing this unrated version, since it could be just as bad, and I'll play a little bit of it and think, oh man, this is not something I want to do for multiple hours of my life, and just have a bunch of unrecorded or, unsubstantial footage for it. But I am sort of glad in some ways the developers are trying again. I think everyone has had like an idea they really like and have invested a lot of time and thought into, but it never got off the ground. I mean, hell, the developers themselves, this idea didn't get off the ground the first time when they first tried it on Kickstarter, but then they got a second chance. But then I guess that was fucked up and they got a third chance with this. I don't think it'll do in any way as well financially as the first game. Like, first impressions are important. But if the game does end up being a lot better than the first game, if it's actually fun, if it's actually scary to people, or it just has all the blood and gore and sex that they wanted from the game, then it might go down as maybe a cult classic. It might eventually be brought up in later years as an example of a video game that tried again and managed to do it right the second time. One of those feel-good stories. I know I kind of sound like really, critical of it, really cynical about the whole thing, and it is kind of hard not to be, but I do understand why the developers would want to try again. There aren't exactly a lot of games out there with this kind of aesthetic. There's Scorn, but that's been delayed. Doom Eternal is going to come out, and its hellscapes has fleshscapes now. And I wouldn't be surprised if the developers of that game saw the trailers for Agony and thought, yeah, we can do this too. Let's do this as well. I mean, overall, it's just kind of a really rough position for the developers. They've done a lot better handling the negativity than I would have. I'll say that right now. Like, if I released a game and it did as poorly as this, I'd be so far too distraught to even type in a line of code to make a game again. On a sort of unrelated note, the new model of the winged succubus from the new trailer kind of reminds me of Scorn Guy a little bit. Might be the ribs, I think, is mostly why. I mean, this wouldn't be the first time these two games have been compared to each other. But anyways, I'll probably get the unrated version since I am playing this stuff on a PC and not a console. The unrated version is not coming out on console, by the way. It comes out October 31st. And I'll play through a bit and see if it's any good. And if it is, I would actually like to make a let's play or whatever of it. But if it isn't, then I think it might be actually time to call it quits. I do actually really want this game to be good. I'd rather have a good game than a bad game. So those are sort of my thoughts on it. Hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.